On November 21st, 1992, Tom Monfiles disappeared after a workplace dispute. A day later, his body was found in a pulp vat with a 50-pound weight wrapped around his neck. Over 30 years later, exactly who killed Monfiles remains a mystery. Welcome to the Monfiles 6 podcast. My name is Damon Schneider.
My name's Mike Putchell.
Tonight's episode is entitled Who the Monfiles 6 Were. So a little background again on the city of Green Bay. Was basically jarred like nothing before because of what happened. I kind of described this myself, again, hearing about the case when I was 15 inside my electronics classroom. And I kind of had the same effect. I was sort of floored by it. One of the things that's interesting in this chapter is it's brought up that the city of Green Bay had 7 pages in the yellow pages just of church listings. Can you explain what the yellow pages were, Mike?
Sure I can, Damon. I don't know how many people are actually not going to know what that is, but just in case they don't, I guess we can explain. It's the phone book. I don't even know if they print phone books anymore, but the yellow pages was the listing of businesses and churches included of just all the local companies and businesses in the area, whereas the white pages, if we want to go into it, were for private residences and all the citizens and their telephone numbers.
I haven't gotten a printed phone book in probably at least 10 years, so...
Yeah, I don't know if they print it anymore. I don't think they print.
Some younger viewers, listeners, may not know what the yellow pages were. Anyways, in the yellow pages, then the font size was pretty small. So 7 pages is a lot of churches.
Well, and I'll add too, in a way, it's kind of ironically tragic that the yellow pages aren't printed anymore, because that may have been printed by Green Bay paper mills.
True. Yeah, very much so. What do you think that amount of churches says about what kind of area Green Bay was in 1992?
I think their point was that they're saying that this is a pretty religious community, and especially a community with the founding going back so far to the 1600s, that it has deep roots in, they said, primarily Catholic and Lutheran churches. So it's got a big history of that.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons that the community was so shocked by Monfiles' death. That the idea that your coworkers would plan to murder you, I think is, in an area like Green Bay, is, again, shocking. Now, you mentioned it was founded in the 1600s, actually 1634. And Green Bay is the oldest settlement in the Midwest, even older than Chicago, which I was surprised to read that fact. Were you?
No, I had known that just from reading about history. I knew that was a early French settlement in the 1600s. That was part of like when the French had control over Canada and the Quebec area, and then expanding down into Wisconsin. So I was aware that Green Bay was older.
So yeah, Green Bay is, it sits at a port to Lake Michigan, and it also has the Fox River running through it, which runs quite a ways. So you could ship lumber basically all the way through the Great Lakes area and down the Fox River. So it was kind of an ideal situation. So one of the things that was brought up in this chapter was the Union conspiracy. What was the Union conspiracy?
That was something that the Green Bay Police and the district attorney had given as one of the main reasons that all of the suspects, the convicted 6 men, were using for their reason to not talk. Essentially, they were all kind of banded together in this vow of silence to keep together in the Union, because they were all Union members, but they weren't all part of the same Union. And it was said that they stayed silent about all of this. They didn't reveal their involvement because they wanted to keep their high-paying jobs.
Yeah, so basically the thought behind the Union conspiracy, and this was the main argument presented by John Sikowski, was that they went out to argue with Monfiles about the tape, and things got a little heated. Monfiles got shoved to the ground and got kicked a few times, and at this point they realized that they're all going to lose their job because they just beat up Tom Monfiles, and so at this point they have to get rid of him, otherwise they'll lose their high-paying Union jobs. And then they all stayed silent because, again, they didn't want to break that Union code, and they didn't want to lose their job. What do you think of that argument? Because again, that was the main, basically, argument presented by the DA to get them all convicted.
I think it could be a possible explanation in other situations, but I think just looking at this particular case, I don't really think there's any evidence of them banding together, only because in the chapter that we're discussing, the authors do go into how these 6 men really didn't have much of a connection with each other. In fact, they said that 2 of the defendants, I believe it was Ray Moore and Mike Hearn, had never even met each other before.
Yeah, so all these guys worked at different parts of the paper mill, and again, some of them didn't even really know each other. So it seems kind of strange that you would just so quickly band together and come up with this vow of silence that you had just killed someone. The authors state one of the things, basically the thesis of the book is the hope of these authors is that this book will help turn the tide of justice in the men's favor. And I kind of wanted to take that as sort of the motto for us going forward too, that we want to turn the tide and change the way that people think of the men who are convicted of that crime. And they go on to say that not one of the men had a reason to harm Monfiles. What do you think that they meant by that?
Well, I just think that they meant by that they, even though that he was found to be the one calling the police about the cord theft that Keith Kutzka was doing, Keith was really the only one you could maybe say had a reason because of that, because Tom turned him in. But other than that, I don't think these people really had much of a connection to Tom.
What's remembered lives. Losing someone precious from our lives is the most painful event that one can endure. Seasons of Life Memorials is dedicated to making sure the person you lost is never forgotten. We work with you to help you craft a film about your loved one's life that can be viewed at the gravesite. We can also help you create a film about your very own life that can be viewed in the obituary section of your hometown newspaper. Imagine that, your friends, relatives, and neighbors viewing your own unique story and how your life truly did matter. Visit our website, seasonsoflifememorials.com, and follow us on social media today to start viewing what we can do for you.
Yeah, they were basically just interested in hearing the tape, and they happened to be sort of in the wrong place at the wrong time, and that they were near Keith as the tape was playing.
Well, I'll add too that, and I will go into it a little bit more when they discuss the whole confrontation part. But I just happen to think some of these men were just in the room. I don't think all of them really cared that much about this whole tape incident.
Why would they really if
Yeah.
if they weren't Tom or Keith, you know?
Mm-hmm.
The authors go on to say that these guys had no intention or inclination to ruin their lives or the lives of others by participating in the murder of a coworker. And I think, obviously, I wasn't at the trial, but as the defense, that would have been my main argument. How about you?
I'm sorry, the argument would be what?
The fact that they're not going to take the chance to ruin their lives over the death of a coworker for someone they hardly know.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. I will say, I mean, there are a couple things that I'll point out from this chapter that the authors tried to use as a reason for them to not do this that I wasn't particularly convinced by. And then they talked about some of the tactics the police used, kind of proving that they think the police were out to get them to fit the narrative that they were going for. I'll point that out in a little bit, but otherwise, yeah, I think that's valid that they didn't have any reason to ruin their lives for this with this tape. It sounded like they were on a great career path.
Yeah, these were jobs that if you were lucky enough to land, you could support your wife and children and lead a middle-class life. So it wasn't something that they would take lightly, especially in an area like Green Bay where good jobs like that were probably hard to come by at that time. So who exactly were the Monfile Six? That's what we're going to get into in this episode. So let's first talk about Dale Bastian, born on May 11th, 1942 in Green Bay. Bastian was considered a bit of an eccentric, but mostly labeled as a workaholic. He had 2 daughters, and he drove expensive vehicles.
The main thing I got from Dale was that a lot of people thought he was a bit eccentric.
Yeah. What were some of the things that he did that made him eccentric?
Well, some of the people, the neighbors, said that he liked to sit out on the porch and play his guitar. And let's see here. There was one thing I thought was interesting about him. This isn't really eccentric necessarily, but he was a high school dropout. I was surprised by that. I mean, they said he went to private schools throughout his education, and then in junior year, he dropped out, and then he worked at paper mill his whole career and ended up in this really high-paying position.
Yeah, that is interesting. That he would be a high school dropout and be able to land a fairly expensive job like that.
And I think
So next
one of the things too I'll add is just these men are like the perfect example of like up north Wisconsin residents, because Dale well, the funny thing about him, the reason he's like stereotypically northern Wisconsinite, is that he and his wife, his first wife, won the WNFL snowmobiling husband and wife relay,
Yeah, yeah, that's funny.
which is cool. I like that.
To
We
our
should add too. Oh, go ahead.
to our non-Wisconsin listeners, we need to explain what up north means because I met someone out who was from, I believe, Ohio, and she told me two things really stood out about people from Wisconsin. One, their obsession with the Green Bay Packers, and two, that everyone's always talking about going up north. So, what is up north?
What is up north? You're asking me?
Yeah, what is up north?
Well, I was going to add that I think it kind of, that definition is dependent on who you talk to, because for me, up north is, I'd say anywhere from like central Wisconsin and north of that, because I mean, I'm from the Milwaukee area. But I was going to add that in the write-up about Mike Hearn in this chapter, he mentioned that he liked going up north to do like hunting and fishing and stuff. And I kind of joked a little bit because he is up north. Like in my view, up north already is Green Bay. And he's talking about going up north to do the hunting and fishing. So
yeah, I guess
depends.
It's where you're located within the state. Up north could mean just anywhere, but in general, it means areas, forested areas where you're going to do hunting and fishing and things like that. That
Yeah.
are dense, that are not populated.
What is it to
specifically
you?
for-
What's your starting point for up north?
I would say around just north of Stevens Point.
Oh, okay. So we were pretty much kind of on the same area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're also as you go up north, you're going to encounter the Fargo accent much more heavily in the upper part of the state. So you mentioned Mike Hearn. He was born on May 6, 1964 in Green Bay. He was the young guy, only 28 at the time. He loved the outdoors. He did have a temper, and he had a role in some barroom scuffles. And he lived with his girlfriend and their son. So what do you think about Mike Hearn being labeled as having a temper and getting into scuffles and within bars?
I didn't really put much weight into that, only because I think the temper comment, wasn't that just coming from one person who said that? I don't remember, but then the barroom thing, I mean, I don't think that really means too much. I mean, he probably had a few drinks and people do dumb stuff when they drink. So there was no record of him getting into fights in a non-bar situation. So I didn't put much weight into that.
And now for a quick break. Memento mori. Remember, you must die someday. However, your life can be remembered forever by contacting us at seasonsoflifememorials.com. We are here to teach you how to create a film about your life that can be seen at your future gravesite as well as within the obituary section of your very own newspaper. Contact us today at seasonsoflifememorials.com. Mike, can you explain the social media / Instagram option of our business?
Sure. So we've talked in the past about the YouTube page, and one of the other options that we have is specifically for an Instagram page. So we know the typical funeral service usually has like a photo board, and people tack on all the physical copy photographs of the individual, which is nice. That looks really good. But one way that you can kind of have that last even longer so that people can continue to see them is by allowing us to create an Instagram page for the loved one. And as you know, Instagram and social media in general, you can upload hundreds, thousands of photos, and even short videos if you have any of the individual. So it's just a nice little way, uh, an additional way to kind of complete the whole package of honoring the loved one.
And we're back. Mike Johnson was born on August 15th, 1947, in South Dakota. He was a quiet guy and a loner. Johnson said his family came first. He had married a Korean native, Kim, and had adopted her children. Mike had 3 daughters, a son, and 9 grandchildren. So one of the things I thought was interesting about Mike Johnson was, how was someone with this background, how would he get involved with the murder of someone?
Mm-hmm. Well, and when I mentioned before how when Keith was going around playing the tape to people, he was the person that I was specifically thinking of, that I would envision him not really being interested in hearing it too much, only because they said he just kind of kept to himself, bit of a loner, very quiet guy. I don't see him really caring that much about this tape.
I don't either. I wanted to make one correction too. In a previous episode, we talked about the size of the vat, and I had said that I thought it had been 10 feet. I've found out since that it was actually 20 feet deep and had a circumference 20 feet as well. So it was much bigger than I thought it was. Now, Keith Kutska was born on March 9th, 1951 in Green Bay. He's described as a bully to some, but also as an intelligent guy to others. He distrusted the government and mill management, and he was well read on topics from Roman and Russian history to law. Keith had a son named Clayton, who was born in 1972, which the reason I bring that up is I have a sister who was born in 1972, so it's very close to my age. So Keith is sort of the main player in this, along with Tom Monfiles. What stood out to you in terms of Keith and his biography?
Yeah, they went into a lot about his different interests. He was kind of like a Renaissance man, as they say, where he knew a lot about things from like ancient history, specifically like Roman history, Russian history, but then he also was involved. He was one of the people more heavily involved in the union activities, going to the meetings regularly and kind of criticizing people who didn't go to the union meetings, but they still reaped the benefits of being a member of a union. And then he was just an outspoken individual. People knew him as being highly opinionated, and he let people know that.
Now, within the documentary film Beyond Human Nature, which covers the Monfiles case, which we'll get into at a later time, Keith is not interviewed, but his voice is portrayed by an actor. And I thought that was one of the things that the film did not do a good job with, was that I thought the actor portraying Keith's voice made him seem a little bit dim-witted. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I didn't really have a thought on that. I don't really even remember the portrayal being too memorable, so I don't have too much of a thought on that.
Yeah, it was just sort of a slow, sort of talking, more blue collar type accent. And I thought, from when I've heard Keith speak, he comes across as being rather intelligent. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, from what we're reading here, just because these people worked in a paper mill, and Keith liked a lot of different things. He was, like I said, interested in the politics and world history. So this is somebody who could have potentially had another career as like a teacher or someone in academia. So my point is that just because these are blue collar people, they have a diverse background, different interests.
Yeah, that's a good point, too. Finally, Ray Moore was born on December 9th, 1946 in Tupelo, Mississippi. He did have a police record, a 1966 felony robbery in Milwaukee. He was the fifth of 8 children. Neighbors described him as quiet and friendly, and he had 4 children: Malcolm, Ivy, Casey, and Ray Reynold III, or Ray. What stood out to you in terms of Ray's biography?
He was the other more highly involved Union member. That's what stood out to me. And it showed that he evidently liked being involved in organizational leadership from even a young age, because they even talked about him being part of the just being a teenager, he was the direct action chairman for Milwaukee's branch of the NAACP. And then they said in 1988 he was a delegate at the Democratic National Convention. And then he was involved in United Way in Brown County on the board for looking for a new director. So my takeaway from him is that he liked being involved in things.
And he lost his job after the court case came out because he had lied on his application about the felony.
I'll add too that he also lost his prior job because he participated in a union strike, and then after that he got the job at James River. So he was really involved in union issues.
So the authors want to give us these portraits of who these men were before we get into the nuts and bolts of the case, because they want us to understand that these were real people with children and wives and ambitions, and we should always think of who they were as we continue on throughout this podcast. They weren't just names. They weren't just the Monfile Six. They were real people. Any final thoughts, Mike?
Final thoughts would just be, I did want to point out how I thought the authors did kind of unfairly make some comments, kind of pushing towards their argument. I wanted to point them out where, regarding their aggression of the police to kind of fit the narrative they were looking, they had mentioned that the police, let's see here, they had said that the police, here it is. So the police spread rumors throughout the mill to see how they would come back to them. If they did that, that is aggressive. I don't agree with that. But then they said they rummaged through garbage cans at the men's homes. To me, saying that, because that's not illegal. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Once you put your trash at the curb, it's considered public. So, when the police are going through that, I didn't really like how the authors put that in there, because they're kind of making it sound like that's aggressive police tactics. It really isn't. If they believe that they're suspects, and whether we agree that they should have been suspects or not, that's beside the point. But they, at that time, believed they were suspects. To me, the authors got a little too far with kind of making us think what they want us to think. And I just wanted to point that out, that they make some comments occasionally that I don't think they should have put in.
Which of the Monfile Six has your greatest sympathy, and why?
That's an interesting question. There really isn't any specific person, really. I might even have to reflect on that a little bit more, and we can talk about that later. Do you have somebody?
I would say probably Mike Johnson, just because of his religious background and the fact that he had adopted the children of his Korean wife.
Yeah, that's interesting. Maybe that's something we could even do like a little episode about, because really I think all of these men, there's something sad about each of them that would be kind of the most tragic about them being imprisoned.
New episodes of the Monfile 6 podcast drop every other Friday. Please join us again. Thanks for listening.
Have you recently lost a loved one and want to hold on to their memory forever? Would you like all of the world to view what their life had been about? Seasons of Life Memorials is what you are looking for. We create individual and unique documentary shorts that will allow anyone visiting the gravesite to view the documentary and your memories of the loved one. Contact us today to set up an appointment at seasonsoflifememorials.com.